Hi everyone, the full source code is available on GitHub as always. Just open the description box and you'll find the documentation and the repo link. Please follow along from there. Today we're going to learn how to integrate KakaoPay into a Flutter app. But before we dive in, let's see how the payment flow actually looks. When I tap the pay button inside my app, KakaoPay opens, and once I complete the payment it comes back to my phone. That's how it should work. Now if you think about it a little more, the app must send a payment request to KakaoPay. KakaoPay opens, and after the user finishes the payment, it should return to our app. To make that return work, we need to tell KakaoPay where to go, and that means we need to define a URL scheme for our app. So we'll have to register our app scheme in both the Android manifest and the iOS info.plist. Even though this may sound a bit technical, don't worry. All we're really doing is calling an API and handling the response. It's simpler than it sounds. Let's take a closer look at the KakaoPay architecture. There are three main flows, one that opens in a browser, one for mobile web, and one for mobile apps. Since we're building a Flutter app, we'll follow the mobile app flow. Now if you check the docs, you'll see there are two important APIs, one for preparing the payment, and one for approving it after it's been confirmed. We'll go over the details soon. Let's set up the project. I started with a new Flutter project. Because this is a payment feature, I added a new screen called Shop Screen. The design for the payment screen was made in Figma. The images and UI code are already available on GitHub, so feel free to use them. Inside Figma, I picked the design I wanted, double-clicked the image, and the download button appeared on the lower left. After downloading, I created an image folder and added the image there. I also downloaded a custom button image and placed it in the same folder. Now before building the payment screen, I cleaned up the main page a little. I deleted some unnecessary code from line 38 and connected the main page to Shop Screen around line 34. I kept the UI simple, it just shows an image and a button. When the button is tapped, it will call the payment request API. The complete code is on GitHub. Now let's install some libraries. Since we're making API calls, we need the HTTP package. To open the KakaoPay screen, we'll also need URL_launcher, because KakaoPay gives us a return URL that contains a custom scheme like KakaoTalk://. And to handle the in-app browser, we'll use Flutter_in-app WebView. Make sure to install all three packages. Once that's done, we'll configure the platform-specific settings. For iOS, add two blocks to the info.plist. One allows the app to open KakaoTalk. The other registers the app scheme. I used HowAreYou for this tutorial. For Android, we'll also add two parts to the Android manifest.xml. The first one lets us open KakaoTalk. The second part is where we define our app scheme. This is important because when KakaoPay finishes, it needs to redirect back to our app using that scheme. Now we're done with the project setup. Let's look at the KakaoPay documentation together. In this tutorial, we're using the single payment flow. If you're testing, the docs tell you to use a specific test merchant code. Keep that in mind. In the request header, you need to include your secret key. Let's pause here and go get that. Go to the KakaoPay Developer Center, log in, and create a new application. You can set the app icon and name however you like. Then go to the Basic Info tab, and click the button to generate your dev secret key. You'll see the key appear, copy and save it. Now back to the Ready API. This is called by the merchant to prepare the payment. For example, let's say a pet shop is selling a dog t-shirt for 12,001. When the user taps the buy button, the merchant sends the product and payment info to KakaoPay. That way, KakaoPay can show the item name and amount correctly. So in the request body, you need to include the merchant code and the product details. At this point, that's enough to show the payment screen we saw earlier. Now if you look at the code, the request KakaoPay function is what calls this Ready API. You'll see the same URL and headers. Just make sure to replace the secret key with your own. In the request body, I included only the essential fields. You can add more if you need. One important thing here is the redirect URLs. After payment is finished, whether it's a success, a failure, or a cancel, KakaoPay will redirect to these URLs. But here's the catch. You cannot use your app scheme like HOWAREYOU : in these redirect URLs. KakaoPay will return an error saying the URL is invalid. So here's what I did. I created 3 simple HTML pages using Firebase hosting. One for success, one for fail, and one for cancel. Each page includes code that redirects the user back to the app using the app scheme. If you just want to test without Firebase, go to the KakaoPay Developer Center and add the default Kakao developer URL to the web platform section. That's enough to get the payment screen working in test mode. Now let's look at the response from the Ready API. The most important parts are the TID, which is the transaction ID, and next_redirect_mobile_URL, which is the URL that opens KakaoPay. The app opens that URL in a web view. If KakaoTalk is installed, it will launch the KakaoPay app. If not, it will show a screen with a link to install the app. Let's check the Open Web View function in the code. If the mobile URL contains KakaoTalk, it opens the KakaoTalk app using URL_launcher. If the app isn't installed, it will fall back to a web view. Now the user goes through the payment screen in KakaoTalk. Once the payment is complete, KakaoPay redirects to the success page, the one we set earlier. And in the redirected URL, there's something called PG_token. We catch this token inside the onLoadStop event in the web view. Then we close the web view and call the Approve KakaoPay function. Let's take a step back and look at what just happened. Now, if we briefly go back to the image, we just opened KakaoPay through KakaoTalk on our phone, and then we tapped the Test Payment button. But if you look closely at the screen after that, the payment hasn't actually been completed. What happened is authentication. In other words, we authenticated this payment, but the payment is not finalized until we call the Payment Approval API. The most important part of the payment request is this PG_token. After the user selects their payment method and completes the step on the KakaoPay page, it navigates to the next page, right? At that point, the PG_token and the return URL get attached to the URL. You can think of the PG_token as a kind of payment session or token. So we send this token to KakaoPay via an API call. To put it simply, my customer has completed the authentication, and this PG_token is the proof of that. Once we pass that to KakaoPay, we'll get the final payment result back, right here at line 144. That concludes the KakaoPay flow. However, one thing we're missing. I mentioned earlier that once the user finishes authentication, the PG_token and return URL get added to the address, right? Those URLs are the 3 callback URLs we provided during the payment ready request. But since those URLs were just for testing purposes, they won't actually return to the app. You can leave the test page we used earlier from Kakao developers as is. They'll just open a simple web page. So in this chapter we're going to create a web page that can open our app from there. For this I simply used Firebase hosting. Let's go ahead and install Firebase hosting. Run these 3 commands. Then select Create New Project. You can name it whatever you like. For the public directory, type public. As for the index, HTML, it doesn't matter. You can choose yes. And since we're not linking to GitHub, just press N when asked. Once that's done, you'll see a public folder created in your project. The code is available on GitHub. From here you'll need to create HTML files for approve, cancel and fail cases, and just copy-paste from GitHub. Each HTML file is coded very simply so that it can redirect to my app. My app is called How Are You, but make sure to replace it with your own app's scheme. Just use the same values you put in your Android manifest or info.plist. Finally, run Firebase deploy, and the page will be hosted. You'll see your hosted URL in the purple box. Copy that. Then go back to your application platform, register the web, and update the return URLs accordingly. That completes the KakaoPay integration. Now for real payment testing, you'll need a phone with KakaoTalk installed. I only had an iPhone, so I was only able to test it on iOS. If you encounter any Android-specific errors, or if I've missed anything, I kindly ask for your understanding, and feel free to share it with me. If I discover anything I missed, I'll update it in the update file on GitHub. At the end, I've gathered the errors I ran into during development. So if you run into anything, I hope they help. Thank you.